What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I wanted to do something different. We're not talking about any one specific comic today. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be an Omega level mutant. Ever since I was a kid, growing up reading X-Men comics, it was a phrase that would come up ever so often, and it was such a nebulous term. It was something that we knew was supposed to be something special. It was something we knew was supposed to be a major big deal, but it was never delved into with any level of meaningfulness. It became one of those things that was so nebulous that whenever you were in a comic book shop talking amongst your comic book reader peers, it was something that you could always argue about because no one knew what the hell it meant or what the implications of being an Omega level mutant are, and that is what I'm here to break down. To do that, we have to go back to the beginning. It was 1986, Uncanny X-Men number 208 by Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. This was the first time that anything resembling Omega level was ever mentioned. This was something that was just thrown out there, a set of words that were not even in the exact same order, but was the exact same idea. Back in 1986, the term Omega level mutant didn't exist, but the term class Omega did. This was a term that was actually coined first by Nimrod. A Sentinel was the first character to ever really come up with the distinction of a mutant being classified as Omega. And in this instance, what this was supposed to mean is that this person was considered an ultimate threat. The way this classification was initially stated by Nimrod was with a severe warning, because a class Omega mutant was considered someone that was not only incredibly dangerous, but this was the first time we ever heard about a mutant having power without an upper limit, with Nimrod stating that the upper limit of the target subject's abilities had yet to be determined, and that extreme caution is to be exercised in all phases of the subject target's apprehension and or subsequent termination. When this phrase was initially coined, it was in reference to Rachel Summers of Earth 811. The term of class Omega wouldn't come up terribly often since this moment, and we wouldn't really hear much about Omega level or anything close to an Omega level mutant until 2001's X-Men Forever number 3 by Fabian Nicieza and Kevin Maguire. It was during this issue, which technically takes place back in the past, back during the early days of the X-Men, going all the way back to like the 1960s, where Jean Grey had accessed Professor Xavier's computer, utilizing his passcodes and discovering data on herself as well as her fellow teammates. It was this issue where Charles Xavier had coined the term Omega level mutant abilities, and directly referencing both Jean Grey and Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, of being the mutants with those exact same abilities in his care, going as far as to state that both Angel, Cyclops, and Beast, while being mutants of great power, were never going to be able to live up to the same level as Jean Grey and Iceman. What makes this mention in X-Men Forever even that much more impactful is just the idea that when Nimrod refers to both Jean Grey and Iceman as Omega level 1 and 2 respectively, it's because those are the first two Omega level mutants that Charles had ever encountered, and much less that Nimrod had very likely ever learned about. The term Omega level mutant from that day forward got thrown around like wildfire. Everyone was always speculating who was an Omega level mutant, who wasn't an Omega level mutant, and why they should be, and even in some cases arguing why other characters shouldn't be considered Omega level mutant. When you finally got to 2019's House of X number 1 by Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz, that it was finally the moment where Jonathan Hickman had pointed out just how ridiculous the term of Omega level mutant was up until that point, even going as far as to cement for the first time in the X-Men's at that point over 50+ year history what an Omega level mutant even is. Now, I've talked about this on my channel before, but if you do not know exactly what an Omega level mutant is, an Omega level mutant as described by Jonathan Hickman is a mutant whose dominant power is deemed to register or reach an undefinable upper limit of that power's specific classification. Now, you're probably sitting here thinking, isn't that what Nimrod said back in 1986? Yes, but at the same time, Jonathan Hickman went a little bit further, stating that both Magneto and Forge are the most powerful mutants of their power types on the planet Earth, with Magneto being an Omega level master of magnetism, where Forge is a master of technopathy. But goes even further into saying that the reason why Forge is not considered an Omega level mutant and Magneto is because Forge's powers can be surpassed, and that there are people out there in the world who have the exact same power as Forge and can use their power to far greater effect. It also doesn't help that Forge's power is something that he can't control. It's all intuitive. He can't force himself to use his abilities. It's something that he just does. He has no agency over it whatsoever. It's actually that, more than anything else, in my opinion, that keeps him from ever being able to be considered an Omega level mutant. Omega level is a classification of a single mutant power, and that while it is quite common that mutants manifest multiple powers, only one is normally of Omega level. And using the example that while Jean Grey is both a telepath and a telekinetic, she is only an Omega level telepath, not an Omega level telepath and Omega level telekinetic. Now, another thing that is Omega level is you hitting that like button. And while you're here, go ahead and click subscribe and make sure you tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that I put out. Doing just those two things that require almost no effort whatsoever and no money out of your pocket makes you an Omega level mutant in my eyes. Being an Omega level mutant is something that should technically be an honor. It should be something that makes you feel pride. And it's something that we have seen characters like Magneto, Storm, Iceman, Exodus, and even Jean Grey at various moments refer to themselves as Omega level mutants, and you can tell that it's something that they own. But the thing that's very scary about the term Omega level mutant, at least in terms of where it comes from, is actually more of a pejorative than it is anything else. Being an Omega level mutant means that that person is a high threat, and not only a high threat, but a high priority to be destroyed. It is a kill list unlike any other, and when you think about it that way, it puts even further context on a lot of the data pages we have been getting as of late since the Jonathan Hickman era started, and even after the Jonathan Hickman era ended. If you go back and take a look at House of X #1 and look at the list of known Omega level mutants, while it serves as a great reminder as to who some of the most powerful mutants in the world are, it should also be a reminder to you exactly who Orcus is looking to kill first. The list of every Omega level mutant at the beginning of the House of X era is no longer accurate, because at least one of the characters on that list is no longer considered a mutant, and that list has been outshined by even more Omega level mutants being revealed over the course of the House of X era, with characters like Iska the Unbeaten, Tarn the Uncaring, Idil, Genesis, Red Root, Aura Sarada, the White Sword, and Kobach Neverheld, pretty much all of the Iraqi mutants that we've been introduced to since the House of X era. That list has grown exponentially, and there's even been mention that there could potentially be other Omega level mutants out there that we don't even know about, or characters that we are looking directly at and just we haven't recognized them as Omega level yet. Case in point, during the Jerry Duggan run that is still current right now, the character of Synch has been hinted at as being an Omega level mutant. Now, granted, the idea of Synch being an Omega level mutant now has kind of been thrown away, because while his powers become so much greater than what it originally was, with him now having the ability to sync with X genes on recall as opposed to having to always be near a mutant in order to duplicate their powers, in the same way that Hope Summers, who is considered an Omega level mutant, has to do as well, we've also learned that Synch's power does actually seem to maybe not have an upper limit, but it does seem to have a glaring weakness, and it's that when he recalls mutant powers from memory, that it shortens his lifespan and even makes him age rapidly. It is a glaring weakness in his power as of late that is yet to be addressed since last year's Hellfire Gala. We've actually seen him use other mutants' powers from recall since then, but we really haven't seen any visible results from that, because for one, Synch always rocks a bald head and a clean-shaven face. That way, no one can actually see his gray hair from the effects of recalling powers from memory. But I don't know, that's one of those that's kind of a weird one. Jerry Duggan really hasn't dived into that one much more. But as you can tell right now, Omega level mutant is a very charged word. It's a set of words that can mean empowerment for one group of people, and for another group of people, it's just another word for a high priority target. But if you were ever wondering where the term Omega level mutant came from, Nimrod was technically the one who gave it to them. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, comment, subscribe, and make sure you tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that I put out. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And what do you think about the term Omega level mutant? Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.